Water. Earth. Fire. Air.
Hey everybody, it's Charlie. I got a lot of requests to do the Avatar The Last Airbender Season 4 video. Aaron Ehasz dropped a bunch of teasers for what their plans were for Avatar The Last Airbender had it got a Season 4. They'd already started to make plans for that right around the time that the live-action movie was getting ready to ramp up. So I know there's a lot of conflicting reports about what was going on with Avatar Season 4. Were they going to do it? Were they not going to do it? He goes into pretty great detail about what was going on behind the scenes, so we'll break it all down and talk about the storylines that they were going to do, particularly Azula, because he said he had some special plans for the Azula character. So if you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the Avatar The Last Airbender videos. They've got the new Netflix series that's supposed to premiere sometime next year tentatively, but that might change a little bit. I will do videos for it as soon as it gets here. So I just broke this down top 10 style. So a lot of people ask what happened to Azula after the events of the TV show. Even if you don't know what their plans were for Season 4 or you haven't read the comics, she still is alive in present day. She hasn't been confirmed dead yet. And in the world of Avatar The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, unless you see someone dead or another character tells you that they're dead, they're still alive out there somewhere just waiting to come back.
I can't believe it. Toph?
Nice to see you again, Twinkle Toes.
That's why at the beginning of Legend of Korra, when they're talking about what happened to all the original characters from Last Airbender, and you see them flash back to their adult forms, you learn about Sokka dying. So there are some characters that came back in present day, Zuko being one of the biggest ones to come back, along with Toph. But assuming that the events of Legend of Korra are meant to be present day, in present day, Azula would be in her early 90s just because she's really close in age to Zuko and he's about 91 during the last season of Legend of Korra. So at the end of Season 3, she completely flies off the deep end and starts to go crazy when she's ready to be crowned Fire Lord of the Fire Nation. Zuko challenges her to the Comet-enhanced Agna Kai and they just completely go at it. It's an amazing battle. Then once Katara immobilizes her with her waterbending, she completely loses her shit and they lock her up. And that's the last we saw or heard about her until they started the comic book series, which sort of continued that storyline. But here's the thing, typically comics aren't always canon to the main series. That's a little bit different for the Avatar The Last Airbender comics and the Legend of Korra comics because the creators are working on them themselves, so technically anything that they work on is canon. In the comics pick up right after the events of Avatar The Last Airbender Season 3, we find out what happens to Zuko's mom. I'll probably do a separate video about that because that's like a whole other hour we could spend talking about that. But while they were still in the planning phases and they might have actually done the Season 4, this is what Aaron Ehasz said about the actual storyline, and he focuses specifically on Azula. So he says, I always intended for Azula to have a redemption arc in the story of Avatar The Last Airbender, and he starts this giant thread. This was all back in April, just a little while ago. He goes on to say it would have been longer and far more complicated than Zuko's. She had not bottomed out yet at the end of Season 3. If you thought that this was her completely off of her rocker, apparently they had planned for her to go even crazier over the top. But then at her deepest moment in her own abyss, she would have found Zuko, her brother. They say despite it all, her brother Zuko would be there for her, believing in her, sticking by her, doing his best to understand and help her hold her pain that she could no longer hold alone. Zuko, patient, forgiving, and unconditionally loving, all strengths he had gained from Uncle Iroh. So it would have been more of Zuko repaying a lot of the lessons that he got during his life-changing field trips with Team Avatar and Uncle Iroh, giving that to Azula in her future arc.
I'm going with Zuko. What? Everyone else went on a life-changing field trip with Zuko. Now it's my turn.
He goes on to say that's how she would have gotten out and changed, with the faith and love of someone she had hurt but who had stuck by her anyway, just as he had been saved by the faith and love of someone he had hurt but who stuck by him, talking about Team Avatar. Although you could also say Uncle Iroh too, because he did push him away for a long time. Then he goes on to say, I'd always imagined that after coming out on the other side, she would be one of those people who hilariously overshares her own feelings all the time, and that she would be a bit over-apologetic, like a Canadian version of Azula, which does sound kind of funny, Canadian Azula. Then obviously, because people were just bombarding him with questions to clarify a lot of this and what was going on with their original plan, he answered a bunch of questions and saying it wasn't an April Fool's joke because he posted this on April 1st. So people are like, is this crazy Avatar Season 4 story just an April Fool's joke? He says, not an April Fool's joke. Oops, picked a bad day for my earnest thoughts on Azula's redemption path. He always believed there would be a 4th season, and then when people were like, wait a minute, that's not exactly what people said in the past. Like Brian and Mike said that they planned on doing 3 seasons, and that was it. So his answer to that is that they originally planned on 3 at the very beginning, then they discussed a 4th, and it seemed like they were going to do it. Then M. Night Shyamalan came on and they reverted to the original plan because the movie was ramping up and Mike and Brian wanted to focus more on helping him make that movie. Even though when you listen to interviews after the fact, Mike and Brian say that they tried to help out with the development of the Avatar: The Last Airbender live action movie, but all of their notes and all their input really just got pushed to the side. So almost nothing that they contributed to that actually made it to screen, which actually makes me feel better because you're already kind of bummed that we didn't get another season of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like, that would have been so cool. But then to hear that they bailed on that idea to focus on the movie, which wound up being terrible, if they had actually been responsible for some of the stuff that happened during the movie, it would have been soul crushing. But the saving grace of it all at the end of the day is that they can now say, because all their ideas were thrown out, that they had absolutely zero to do with what happened with that live action movie. Because the comics are canon to the main series, though, we actually do know what happened to Azula for the couple years after the events of Avatar: The Last Airbender series. So each one of the different comics, like The Promise, The Search, Smoke and Shadow, The Rift, those take place about 1 year right after the other, so they're just slowly aging up. So they're still pretty young, but it's still a long time before the events of the flashbacks that we saw during Legend of Korra when they're in their 30s, early 40s. So right at the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Azula gets locked up after this fight here. Zuko is officially crowned Fire Lord. Aang is there, and it's this nice celebration and an end to the 100 Years' War. It's a nice reference to the flashbacks that we got with Roku when he was giving Aang all this history, and you saw the flashbacks to when he was the Avatar with his best friend at the time, who was Fire Lord Sozin. He was the person that started the 100 Years' War. That's why they call it Sozin's Comet. So sort of bringing things full circle. Right after that, the comics pick up with The Promise, which is sort of the story of early Fire Lord Zuko's days and him trying to deal with a lot of the lingering issues from the 100 Years' War. So they have all these Fire Nation colonies and the Earth Nation that they have to deal with, but they do bring Azula back, and you learn what he did with her after the end of the events of the Avatar: The Last Airbender finale. Ozai himself was thrown in prison because he was such a danger to everyone, and there was still a lot of Ozai loyalists within the Fire Nation itself, so there was a lot of worry that he would come back and try to retake his throne from Zuko. But because Azula's mental state had broken down so much and Zuko took pity on her, he put her in a mental institution. The year after that, Zuko goes on a quest to find out what happened to his mother and finds out that Azula has a bunch of letters that their mother had sent her that she had kept from him their whole lives. So there's a secret correspondence that he never knew about. He gets really upset. She burns all the letters and demands to be taken with him on the quest, otherwise she won't give him critical information that he needs to track their mother down. So the story of The Search is literally that, a life-changing field trip that they take Azula on. She's a total problem child to them the entire time. She tries to escape constantly and gets super pissed off. She's still hallucinating things. She hallucinates their mother. She starts to twist a lot of the memories of their mother in her mind because you don't really get a sense for how she felt about their mother during the actual series. She only talks about her a couple times briefly. But as much as you would think that they'd focus on Zuko's mental state and how he deals with the idea of finding their mother after she's been in exile for so long, a lot of the story really does cover what's going on in Azula's head, which I think is a really big payoff for fans. She's such an amazing, complex character within the world of Avatar that the more you get to learn about her, the better, the more interesting she seems. So this just tries to continue that idea. I will do a separate video at some point explaining the full story of what happens while they're searching for their mother, when they find her, what they do with her, and what happens after that. But eventually they do find their mother. Azula winds up escaping, and she just goes off into the wild, never to be seen again for a little while till she comes back. She resurfaces during the Smoke and Shadow comic book, and it's a couple years after the events of The Search, so she seemingly got her shit together while she was running around in the wild. But we learn that she takes on this persona to try and push Zuko in a more hardcore direction, and she explains that she no longer wants to usurp the throne, and her role now, as she views it, is to guide Zuko to a more hardcore path, to turn him into a person that's more like their father, Fire Lord Ozai. As you would expect, at the end of that storyline, she disappears again, seemingly escaping in a puff of smoke. She reappears briefly in a sort of end tag scene, but then disappears again, so obviously she's still alive somewhere out in the world. But that's all while the Avatar characters are in their early 20s, but like I said, during the Legend of Korra flashbacks, they're in their late 30s, so there's still just a whole bunch of unanswered time about what Azula's been doing and what she's doing in present day if she didn't die sometime after the events of what's going on in these flashbacks, which I'm assuming she did not. So the beauty of this new Avatar The Last Airbender Netflix series that they're doing, these new episodes, expanded storylines, is that they can cover a lot more Azula stuff that's going on. You can actually spend more time in her head than you did during the original series. If they do want to go beyond the events of the finale, because that's such a huge moment to go out on, and they want to do some of the comic book stuff, like say if the TV show went for 4 or 5 seasons, then they'll have to find some way to completely re-engineer that plot, because Day of the Comet is such a huge moment to go out on that it's just weird if you have a little tag after that that doesn't seem quite as big. Like you have this amazing season 3 or season 4 ending, depending on how they plot it out, and then you have a 5th or 6th season with stuff that doesn't seem quite as cool. So what I do think is going to happen is that there will be some changes from the original storyline as part of the adaptation to just plan out because of however many seasons they're intending. They haven't revealed a total episode count or what that's going to be. It's always a little bit different for live action shows than it is for animated shows. So if we get any news about that, of course I'll do a video. But let me know in the comments, what do you want them to do with Azula in this new Avatar The Last Airbender Netflix series? If there's any Avatar videos that you guys want me to do, just let me know in the comments below. While you wait for everything, click here for my other big video about the new Netflix episodes that they're doing, and click here for that brand new Rick and Morty Season 4 trailer. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.